Welcome back to In the Wings, the podcast that keeps you up to date on all things Beechmont Players. I'm your host, Kiya, and today we have something really special for you. This episode is part of a two-part series where we dive into our upcoming 2025-2026 season. We've worked really hard to bring you exclusive interviews with all the directors, giving you insight into what's ahead. Since we recorded these over the holiday break way back in December, we're video calling with folks from far and wide, so you might notice some variation in audio quality. But we really appreciate your patience with that, and we promise the conversations are well worth it. Now, this is a two-parter because instead of giving you one insanely long episode, we figured we'd break it up into smaller, more digestible ones. That way, you can take it all in without feeling super overwhelmed. So for this first part, we sit down with Dan and Ed Cohen to talk about the start of our season. There's a lot of excitement, big reveals, and behind-the-scenes details coming your way. So, without further ado, let's jump in.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Yarrick, Vice President of Shows for the Beechmont Players on this dearly beloved podcast with my friends Kiya Fix, Vice President of Marketing, and our Mr. President, Dan Cohen. How's it going, y'all?
Doing
Good.
great.
How are you?
Don't all speak at once.
I was like, who's going to talk first?
Yeah. We're doing great, Yeah, we're stoked for this episode, talking with all our directors for the upcoming season after our season announcement at our membership event last couple months ago. So first director up for the season with a play that I have a little bit more stake in than normal, which we'll hear about in a second. Kiya, you are directing a play that I wrote, All Things
Yay.
Considered. Do you want to talk about the piece? It's probably better for you to talk about it than me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it follows these three very frantic White House consultants as they are giving a presentation to defend their current fictional president's actions. And it's basically filled with the notion of they're basically presenting the idea that no matter what happens right now, it's been worse in the past. So it's filled with this presentation of them showing all these past president blunders from Bill Clinton's runway haircut, Andrew Jackson's foul-mouthed parrot, and Taft's infamous bathtub mishap. It's great.
Did you include the Taft story specifically because of we're being in Cincinnati? He's from Cincinnati, so.
So I did not know that. That's awesome. I love that.
People are very fond of the Taft bathroom story here.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
dude, that is actually one of my favorite moments in the play that I wrote. It's one of those moments where you write it and you're like, I'm funny. Just kidding. No. Yeah, Kiya, tell us what drew you to this piece?
I think the better question is what didn't draw me to the piece.
Oh, that's good.
For me as a director, I always try to either do something that's fairly unknown or not done often. But if I do a piece that is more well known, then I try to put a very unique spin on it and kind of present it in a way that audiences haven't seen that show done before. So this one's basically the best of both worlds. It's new, audiences haven't seen it, and the way it's kind of staged and presented in the script, it's very open to creativity and collaboration. So I don't know. I think it's just going to be a really, really cool experience and allow so much creative freedom and collaboration between us as the design team and then the cast. So
Yeah. If anybody's listening to this and wondering why I'm facilitating this discussion with Kiya, I'm a firm believer that the best part about the theater world is the collaborative aspect. So I personally, and this may be a controversial opinion, I tend to believe that works are going to be better like original works are going to be better if you have other eyes on it, or other eyes directing, or other people facilitating that discussion. Because, you know, as a playwright, you can write something and you can have a very clear vision. And if, like, for example, if I'm directing a piece that I wrote, I'm going to be super limited potentially to the vision of it that I had when I wrote it. So I think by handing it off to like a great director like Kiya, for example, she's going to be able to see things that I wouldn't see because I was so specific in the vision when I was writing it. You get immersed in the story and the viewpoint, right? So yeah, I'm excited to see what you can do with all the like bits, gags, and tricks that end up in this like historical farce in a way. Does that align with the way you guys kind of view that whole like new play development process?
Yeah, I personally haven't been part of a of a new play development process, so it's a new experience for me, but I'm super excited about it, and it seems like it's going to be a really fun time.
So, as it pertains to our season, Stranger Than Fiction, the season centering around real world concepts and the kind of bizarro things that exist in the real world that make it, you know, strange. How would you say this relates? It's pretty clear, I would say, but I'm gonna let you
Yeah.
articulate it anyways.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we're doing a presentation. They provide all these examples throughout history of presidents like just making the worst mistakes and whatnot. So you have all of those references, but really it comes down to the fact that it really highlights a thing that I think we're all pretty familiar with, the way that we often like excuse or justify decisions that we make by pointing to past flaws and blunders and whatnot. I feel like there's always this like tendency to say like, well, it could be worse, look at this guy, he did that, as a way to like avoid taking responsibility and like, growing. So I think audiences are really going to be able to kind of resonate with this and potentially spark like conversations about how they might rationalize and justify their own challenges that they face. But above all else, I think, they'll leave with a lot more trivia knowledge that they can use at their next trivia night. I'm also curious as to, Mike, your like impetus for writing the piece. What sparked that, and then what do you hope that you will gain from the experience and stuff?
So I wrote this I think my first year in grad school, we had like a final and I think it was a dramatic analysis class, and this was one of our options for a final was like write a short piece. I think I wrote about 20 pages of it then, and then over the course of the year, I've just kind of been adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. The biggest part of me, and I should still probably like look up and define if there's a specific term for this fallacy, but during the political season, we always get this sort of notion of like when we're discussing candidates of like, oh, well, he's better than the last guy or she's better than the last guy, right? And that's kind of an impetus for the decision. And I think that's fair. But I just always kind of have this hope for like, I think we can hold ourselves to a higher standard and maybe like demand more sometimes, not even just in a political sense. I also had a moment, and I think this is discussed in the show too. So, a friend of mine was pretty hopped up on alcohol one time and considering driving home, and I kind of
Hopped
pushed
up
hopped up on alcohol. Yeah. Is
because
that
of hops, get it?
Yeah.
Oh, yep.
See, I can't even drink beer, and I got that.
I was like, is this what the kids say? Hopped up? I don't know
Oh
how that
no.
No, it
that-
isn't.
no, not a yeah. All right. Well, so I, kind of in this discussion of like, hey, you probably shouldn't drive home. The response was, well, I've driven home drunk plenty of times. So, and I've never, nothing bad's ever happened. So here you go, which I think we can all agree is a pretty trivial, not great argument. Um, and just the way that sort of connects throughout this play is kind of the main subject for me. So although everything discusses presidents and different candidacies and everything, to me it's more this discussion about like, hey, we can like ask for more, and we don't have to limit ourselves to just like better than the last. We can actually have a standard that we set and a precedent that we want and crave for the future instead of just saying, hey, all things considered, things are pretty good comparatively, right? And that's just a question that I'm always kind of compelled by, and hopeful of people to push further, if that makes sense. And then on top of that, I just think writing a fun piece politically too. I think one of the discussions I had with my professor when I first wrote this was like, so you have these three strong political advocates in the play, and that is a role we just naturally assume of men in like that context. Like we assume that's where this is going. And I actually think that, and so in the discussion, we're like, how cool would it be to have that actually presented in a different way? Like we have like the only playwright note in there is like, hey, this piece would be strong. Like it would be a strong disservice to just have like white men in the show because that's like not, that's like playing into the stereotype that we assume of this role. So I think it's a good opportunity to kind of diversify our sphere this season, especially with like a two-man show that we have coming up, A Steady Rain, and what have you. So I think it kind of balances the playing field a little bit. As far as my hopes for the piece, I mean, it's very freaking cool to have something that you wrote kind of like done fully out. I think that's a privilege that playwrights don't always expect to have. Like again, it's not about having your work. I mean, you want to have your work done, but sometimes it's just about getting an idea out there and writing about it and engaging with it for yourself, which this piece really was for me. So the fact that it's getting to be done is like wild for me and not a privilege I take lightly. So as in the moments that we lead up to the play, there's a lot of workshopping of it. Like we have this final draft. How can we make it better and constantly like make it more relevant to the modern sphere? We're coming out of an election season. So although I don't consider the play political, you have to respect the climate that you're doing it in and like know that you have to serve people and kind of the mentalities that they're going to enter this space in for that piece. So making it enjoyable in the societal context and yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my word vomit for that. How does that sound?
No, I think it sounds great. I'm so excited for you, and I think it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, I think it fits really well into the season, kind of the way just from it being an all-female show in particular is really exciting. We don't uh it does nicely balance with the steady rain. So that to me is like an appeal just from a programming standpoint. I
Yeah.
think that the fallacy you were sort of talking about is like the opposite of the gambler's fallacy, which
Hmm.
is that um something is like a random event is more likely to happen after a series of the opposite event taking place. So like if you've lost 10 times in a row, like there's like this feeling of being
Yeah.
uh due a win, or like if on a roulette wheel if 16 just came up, like the gambler would never put it on 16 for the next one because it just won't come up again, even though it's like a random event.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's like the opposite of that almost, where like the 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 thought that like a pattern is inherently destined to like destined to continue itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
an interesting thing to think about.
And you hope that obviously people leave the play and enjoying themselves. I think the trivia and kind of going through the biggest blunders of every presidency is can get really goofy. We're by no way claiming that all of this is like literal interpretation, right? Like this is through the lens of these three people in a very sporadic situation. So the tensions that kind of arise between them is hopefully pretty like exciting and engaging for people. Not to hype up my own piece too much, you know. Um yeah, and I mean I just really appreciate Beechmont for taking the risk on that. Hopefully it'll be a great time one way or another. Um with that, Kiya, do you have another piece in the season that you are inherently excited for? Not necessarily saying you're not excited for all of them, because I believe all three of us in the room share that excitement for the entire slate. But anything specifically for you?
Yeah, so I mean, all of them do excite me. I think you have assembled a really just fantastic season, Mike, and I'm very excited for it. I will say as someone who likes true crime and listens to a lot of true crime podcasts and stuff, I think the Steady Rain is just really unique and interesting, and I'm super excited for that one. Also because it's going to be staged around Halloween, and that's notorious spooky time. So that one, I just think the premise itself is really interesting, and yeah, I can't wait for that one too.
If anybody has a lead on like a drippy warehouse, like with like flickering fluorescent lighting, just like let us know because we want to do it somewhere kind of gross.
Love that.
That's our pitch to anybody listening. Please, abandoned mall.
Abandoned mall would be great.
Abandoned mall. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else. Like maybe a building that almost burned down, but then didn't.
There was that's a good idea. There was back in like the early 90s, Beechmont Players rehearsed briefly at this like abandoned hair salon. It wasn't abandoned, it was just like out of business, I think.
Yeah.
And they just hadn't cleared out like some of like the stuff. So there was like mannequin heads, like where the wigs were, and like, and I remember this as like a kid. I was like 10, like sitting in this like gross old hair salon with like hair still in the corners and like the salon chairs kind of all piled up,
Yeah.
That'd be so creepy, like closing it for the night after you're done rehearsing and just having all the mannequin heads just like kind of sitting there
staring at you.
Oh.
Well, I very distinctly remember sitting on this like step that was like at the entry, and there were like little like dead roaches just like
Ew.
rushed to the side. Like nobody was going to clean it. It was just they just swept it over to the corner basically.
Sure.
Of
So
course,
that's what we're looking for, you guys.
Yes.
That sort of space.
Sign us up.
And
In
then
fact, if you have that, we'll do all of our shows there.
Yeah. And then come see those shows too. It'll be part of the atmosphere, it'll feel like it's intentional, I promise. All right. Kiya, thank you so much. Dan, we'll talk with you very soon about the show that you'll be directing in our season, which
I can't wait.
A lot of people are excited for. So stay tuned.
And now we are sitting down with Ed Cohen, the director of A Steady Rain by Keith Huff, which is going to be our October show. Welcome, Ed.
Hi, welcome, you guys. It's good to see you both.
Good to see you
too. So first and foremost, why are you interested in directing A Steady Rain?
Well, I had not been familiar with it, and it was called to my attention during discussions about the possibility of me directing for Beechmont. And I kind of fell for the play. It meets a lot of my personal preferences. It's kind of it's obviously character driven. It has an interesting history to it because it was kind of workshopped up in Chicago where the play takes place. But it went to Broadway, but it was only a 12-week deliberate limited run with 2 movie stars in it, with Hugh Jackman and Daniel Craig. It sold a ton of tickets. It set some box office records for like the first week of tickets because of those 2 guys being in it. But Craig had never been on Broadway. Jackman has a lot more musical theater background, but so it got a lot of attention, and then it just kind of went away. I know it's been produced around the country here and there, but there are probably reasons. It's dark, and it has it's 2 guys, and it's a long 1 act, and these are things that sometimes it's hard to fit into a theater schedule. On the other hand, if you're looking to use the show could be done very minimally. I'm kind of a minimalist director. It's my sensibility is very much that. I don't really like to have shows that are set heavy or tech heavy. I'm not against it. I've done shows like that, but there's something about doing a show where the tech just isn't going to get in the way, and the set's not going to get in the way, and it becomes about acting. about characters and the relationships. It's also an unusual structure because they describe it as a duologue, which I don't think I'd ever heard that term before. But it's the idea of like competing monologues to the audience and maybe to an unseen interrogator, but at different times the different speakers step out of the monologue and correct the other one, or they start to have an argument with the other one about it. So it's not really clear that the speakers are speaking at the same time all the time, or whether this is just a joint recollection of heads. But it makes for a real challenge in terms of its pace and how do you determine what this actually looks like. I mean, the fact that it's a simple scenically, it's a little deceptive because it's you still got to block it and you still have to have the movement look natural. And sometimes when you got like, I've seen pictures of some productions that just had two chairs. I kind of think there should be a table. I've seen it with two tables. I've seen it with backdrops of like a rundown tenement cityscape. I had a crazy idea that's probably not doable of having like suspended windows that have rain water pouring down on the outside of it. But anyway, it is the kind of play I like to do. I like to do kind of serious, darker, character-driven stuff. I kind of developed a, for better or worse, kind of a notoriety for doing that over the years. But that's okay because some of that material just suits me and my sensibility, and and a lot of really, really good plays kind of fit into that category. That's a really long-winded answer to your question.
No, that's great. Yeah, I'm very excited, and we're doing it around the Halloween time too, which is perfect for Beechmont to dip their toes into the little darker material, which we've talked about that, Ed. I also happen to be a huge fan of.
No, I think audiences can easily be drawn into it. I think people sell audiences short a lot about what they'll accept and what they won't, and you will default to quote unquote easier material.
Yep.
This is sad. It's a sad story in the context of your season's theme about real events and historical events. It's not the center of this play, but it's kind of like a pivot point of the play. The author kind of took some liberties of changing the city in which this event took place just to suit himself. It doesn't use any of the real names, but it is I don't know what the right word is. It's very important to the play.
Yep.
It's not about that exactly, but it really has a lot to do with the different direction the two characters go.
Yeah. Do you want to go more into like what that real world connection is in
Sure.
your show?
It's interesting. When I first started talking to Mike about this, I was started looking for plays that fit that theme. And there's not as many of them as you think.
Yep.
There's a lot of musicals, lots of musicals, and a lot of Shakespeare, but not so much in terms of just straight plays. The event that they do is that in Milwaukee, two policemen came upon a young, naked Vietnamese teenager, hysterical in the street. And he was only speaking Vietnamese, and they couldn't understand what he was talking about. He looked terrified. They got a blanket and put it around him. And they were trying to decide what to do when a young man comes out, tells them that he's this boy's uncle, and he'll take care of it. Now, they were kind of faced with a choice of, do we want to look any further into that story, or do we just want to get on with our own business and forget about it? And they chose to just get on with their own business and forget about it, just accept that this guy was his uncle, even though they really didn't know, and the boy couldn't tell him anything. As it turns out, that the so-called uncle was Jeffrey Dahmer, and the boy was actually a Laotian kid who was one of his most notorious victims.
Mm-hmm.
So he was later murdered and cannibalized by Dahmer. And it became a driving point for the subsequent events and careers of the two policemen. So it is kind of like a little known true event, but it was a kind of a very it's a very major event in these guys' lives, and certainly it has a lot to say in and of itself about, because I think the play is about choices, is about what drives the choices that people make, and lots of the times they're good intentions, lots of the times they're because of character flaws, and sometimes you have to get beyond yourself and ask harder questions. And these guys did not. And they both paid a price for it.
Yeah, I can't even imagine like living with that guilt. I That would just be insane.
Then there was a Jeffrey Dahmer Netflix show that came out like a year or two ago, and it depicts this event also, right? Like this
Yeah.
is a crux point in that series as well. Very controversial series, but there's also like a good wave of like true crime kind of going through the nation. That's like a big thing right now, whether it's board games, podcasts, what have you.
When you turn on space and cable any evening, there's 4 shows any given night on Dateline or Snapped
Yep.
or I forget all the different titles, but people are very, very attracted to that material.
Yep.
Because they can't. I think people just can't relate to the mindset of people that would do something horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am a big true crime fan, and that is like I'm like I can't even wrap my head around how someone would do this to another person. It's like it's scary.
And how often do you get to see that on stage? That's like that's a
Yeah.
rarity, right? That's what I'm excited about because the actors have to do that work, right? That the audience supposedly can't or doesn't or can't imagine.
When you look into history, you look at your own lives. Say, go back through your whole life and say, well, how different would everything have been if I'd chosen X versus Y? And it may have seemed to be an innocuous choice at the time, but it's something that as you look back to it, you realize your whole life changed.
Hmm.
If you'd never gone to some place and met somebody that turned out to be important in your life, had these guys not just wandered into that particular neighborhood at that particular moment with neighbors watching it unfold, which is where how it kind of spun out of control for them. So I think that the difference, somebody like Dahmer, who's a complete psychopath and disturbed in no way we can understand. We're not trying to understand Dahmer, but you're trying to understand these two normal guys who are policemen are trying to do the right thing and have devoted their lives to doing the right thing. And they just make a decision, and the play kind of sets up a lot of reasons that they may have simply made that in retrospect was the wrong decision. Should they have known it? Should they have asked more questions? But I like that theme in general, is how small choices define huge events in your life. And it kind of layers the characters and layers how these performances would be.
Yeah, I love that. The rest of our season includes All Things Considered by our very own Michael Yerrick, a to be determined Christmas radio play directed by Dan Cohen, and then Love Letters by A.R. Gurney, and then Cheaper by the Dozen, adapted by Christopher Sergel. Do one of those titles like kind of pique your interest at all?
Well, when Love Letters first surfaced, Gurney was really hot back in the late 80s and early 90s. He wrote Love Letters and everybody jumped on it because it was very easy to produce. And I'm not sure how Beechmont's going to do it, but a lot of times it's done with multiple couples doing it's like a reader's play of a story of a relationship, of the letters that this couple wrote to each other throughout their lives. And my wife and I, when they first opened the Covedale, we were one of the couples that got to read that. So I've always had a soft spot for that play. I think it's very entertaining. The one that I'm interested in is a radio type drama Christmas play not necessarily because of which play you pick, and not necessarily because Dan is directing it, but because I love stage radio stuff with the Foley sound and things like that. I think audiences love it, and it heightens the theatricality of it, and it makes it more than just another production of Christmas Carol, which is a great play depending on the version. But it gets the audience much more involved. Modern audiences don't know much about radio. Radio's gone. I'm old and I don't remember much live radio material. But at the time, it was people, when you couldn't see what they were doing, it was this fantasy world that radio filled up and in the heads of the listening audience. And I've always, every time I see something like that staged, the audiences just go crazy for it. They love, and you do the clever Foley sound and the idea of making it look like what a studio looked like when a radio drama was being produced. I think it's just fantastic. I love those. And I think you can really sell it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I know radio today isn't what it like at all what it used to be, but I will say the mornings where I'm commuting to work, I listen to the morning show on Q102 and I get very grouchy if I don't get to hear it. I don't know.
No, I agree.
I've asked Kiya this question. Ed, do you know the play Pontypool?
Pontypool?
Yeah.
I do not.
Okay. I always tell people about this play because now it's got our dark connection and it's set in a radio studio. So it's about a zombie outbreak that happens via language. So if you say the right words in the right order, you become a zombie. Anyways, the whole play takes place in a radio studio while they're announcing this zombie outbreak. And then at the end of the play, the zombies break into the theater. Anyways, that's my wrap up play to encompass both the ideas of our dark, steady rain material and our radio dramas, which we love and adore.
Remind me, this will be your first time directing for Beechmont, correct?
It is. I have performed at Beechmont, but not recently. Actually, my wife and I met in a play at Beechmont Players, so I have a.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is one that I'm super excited about.
Well, I'm very excited.
This has been another episode of In the Wings, a podcast production telling you about all things Beechmont Players. If you'd like to get involved with us or see what else we've got going on, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can do so via our website, beechmontplayers.org. Link in the description. Until next time.